pioneers who are working in the area of artificial intelligence and SETI and cosmology. The book really, unlike Biocosm, which is really a kind of a statement of a theory, this tries to be a story and their story about the work they're doing to push the frontiers of science. And that was really the most fun thing, was meeting them and also kind of learning about some of the likely non-human players on the stage, like these super smart machines, and trying to kind of figure out what role they might play in the future evolution of the universe.
My very favorite picture you quoted you wrote a little bit in one of your chapters on the Hubble ultra deep field images.
Yes.
And just to some who don't know what that is, Hubble was basically pointed into the darkness of the universe, into the size of a dime or a quarter type picture.
Yes.
And in that small frame must have been thousands of other, not stars, but galaxies, each with billions of their own stars. But you write in your book, The Hubble Ultra Deep Field Images, you have some incredible impressions about that.
Yes, I wrote about this for a magazine called What is Enlightenment? And what I basically said is that in contemplating the image of the Hubble Ultra Deep Field, I was reminded of the sense of wonder felt by von Leeuwenhoek, who was the father of modern observational microbiology. He looked in a microscope and he glimpsed these vast hordes of what he called wee beasties. And these were the little bacteria and nematodes that turned out to be the very foundation of the global ecosystem, the microscopic cells of Gaia's flesh and blood. And what I thought I saw in that Hubble field was that this unexpected, unsuspected celestial grandeur may someday be appreciated as a kind of poignant baby photo, the faint image of a moment unfathomably distant in time and space when the vast universe began an utterly mysterious process of coming to life. They're baby photos.
In your lifetime, what would you love to see? What would you love to hear about with regards
I would
to
love to see Seth Shostak succeed in his quest to discover a signal.
Really? That's it?
Well,
that's what you want?
That would be.
It's not a bad request.
Well, it's not a bad. But I think it would be. It would certainly be a vindication of my hypothesis. But it would also be a moment of extraordinary adventure.
I would like to see physically, because I'm a believer that we've been visited, but I would like to see something happen. I would like to see an extraterrestrial up front, myself. Mm-hmm. I would love to see that.
The other thing I would like to see, and this is more in the field of technology, I'd like to see us, as an engineering task, really undertake the construction of what you probably are aware of, the construction of a space elevator.
Yes.
Because I think that's the next step, the next giant step equivalent to the construction of the Transcontinental Railroad that will literally get us off the ground in our effort to probe space.
Wouldn't that be interesting?
Yeah, I think that one is. I actually gave a talk on that at a NASA conference a few years ago, and it's actually closer than a lot of people think.
Would you take that elevator ride up there?
I think I would.
I would.
Yeah.
I would, and up you go. It's a slow ride, I hear.
Yeah, it takes about, the real trick is getting through the Van Allen radiation belt without getting fried.
Well, we've done that with the astronauts, haven't we?
That's right, that's right, but it's a little slower.
Of course, some say we never even went to the moon.
Oh, I think we did.
I do too.
Yeah.
I do too. With everything that you have written about in this book, The Intelligent Universe, did you come across something that was difficult for you? The process of composing both this book and Biocosm was excruciatingly difficult for me. The whole process, because I was dealing with really some very unusual ideas and trying to both grasp them and to convey them in a way that was made sense to lay people, to regular readers. I found really excruciatingly difficult. The intelligence behind this, is it emotional? Is there a part of it that reasons and contemplates?
There might be. There might be, and that's a very interesting and difficult question to answer, because as we know, there is something that we call emotional intelligence, and many theorists, intelligence theorists, believe that emotion is an essential element of consciousness, that you can't have one without the other. So I think that, and one of the other interesting aspects of that is, could you and should you build machines that essentially have emotions? And people are working on that right now.
Some people believe we've been visited already by these intelligent beings. Are you one of those?
I'm a skeptic. I'm not willing to say yes. I'm not willing to say no. I'm anxious that we keep up the search for evidence of that. So I would characterize myself as a skeptic, but not somebody who would dismiss out of hand that possibility.
See, I think there's just too much ancient evidence in terms of writings, texts, drawings on walls, on tablets, which kind of depict some kind of visitation in the past.
Well, here's the other thing that I believe in. It's a sort of an odd way of thinking about that. I have a chapter in my book, The Intelligent Universe, called "The Medium is the Message." And if I'm correct...
Sounds like Marshall McLuhan, if I remember.
That's Marshall McLuhan. But in this case, it's the cosmic medium. And if I am correct, what we are in receipt of, in the form of what I call the cosmic code, that life-friendly collection of physical constants, that's in effect a message. And it's a profound message. It's a message in the same sense that DNA is a message from one generation to the next. But it's one of the deepest messages and most pregnant, if you will, with meaning that you can conceive of, because it's essentially an instruction set for growing a new cosmos.
I got to tell you, one of the most mind-perplexing lines in your book is the title. When you talk about the emerging mind of the cosmos, it's almost like it's growing.
It is. I'm asked the question: Do you literally mean that the universe is in the process of coming to life? And the answer is yes. That it's essentially an emerging organism. That's literally what I mean.
Well, I got to tell you, the emergence of the science behind this is also incredible. Again, there's this great design behind it, James. This puzzle. I mean, who could think this? I mean, this is the work of an architect.
It is. It is literally. Paul Davies said this, and Brian Greene, the string theorist. The strangely life-friendly quality of our universe, really, it's the deepest question in all of science. It's deeper than the mystery of life's origin. It's deeper than the mystery of how consciousness emerges. It's deeper than any other question in science, is why is the universe life-friendly? And that's the issue I'm trying to tackle.
I mean, who would conceive of putting some kind of biological life, let's say on comets, and then sending them off throughout the universe to seed planets? Who would conceive that you had to have a moon at a certain distance from Earth in order for life to be what we are now?
Without that moon, there could be no tides, and you simply wouldn't have the preconditions. There was a book a couple of years ago published called Rare Earth.
Yes,
which suggested just how fortunate, in fact, our little planet was for that very reason.
What would you say to an ET if you met one?
I think I would attempt to begin with what I would think of as the common Rosetta Stone, which are the laws of physics, and see if you could build some kind of a common vocabulary out of that. And I think the topic of mutual interest, the most likely topic of mutual interest, would be the questions of science. What's the, and I'd like to test. I'd like to see if test my theory and see what they might think of it.
But this does mesh with common physics, doesn't it?
Yes.
Ray Kurzweil is a great selling author as well, and he is the author of a book called The Singularity is Near. He wrote your foreword.
Yes.
Is there some tie-in with his kind of work?
Yeah, Ray and I share the vision, really the vision that that intelligence is progressing to a kind of point where it will saturate the cosmos and essentially convert it to what I think it's a term that Ray has coined called computronium, which is
that's his word, right?
Yes, it's a neologism, a new word, and I think what it means is when essentially all of the elements, all of the electrons and protons have been converted essentially into tiny little computer chips, logic elements, and that's really a vision that we share.
Do you ever see the day where human life will just vanish and artificial intelligence will just continue to flourish on the planet?
That's a possibility, and there's a famous scenario laid out by Arthur C. Clarke in Childhood's End.
Mm-hmm.
He tells the story of a future time when all the children of the earth are transformed into a kind of collective mental being, a sort of incorporeal superorganism that's being prepared for incorporation into what he calls the overmind. And it's kind of poignant because it really chronicles a final farewell to all that we hold dear as human beings, especially the dream of a human future embodied in our physical children. I think it's unduly pessimistic, because I believe that humanity and whatever progeny species, biological species we leave after us are likely to persist side by side with whatever artificial or hybrid beings that may emerge. I admit maybe I'm a cockeyed optimist about that, but I think there's some evidence that will be the scenario.
It could be when? 100 years from now?
Well, it could be that soon. Yes, Ray Kurzweil predicts it might be even a little bit sooner when we reach the point of the singularity. And the singularity is that point when essentially artificial intelligence jumps ahead of the human variety.
Biocosm, does that tie into this work here?
Well, Biocosm, yes. Biocosm really sets forth the theoretical framework. It's the scientific argument for what I call my selfish biocosm hypothesis. The intelligent universe is really more of a narrative, a story about the probable future of the universe. I kind of think of it as a projected travelogue of what lies ahead.
Well, the universe is a little under 14 billion years old, and, they will, I think, get to a point where they will see that real first light of that Big Bang, that explosion, if they're correct. You know what they could see, too? I've always thought about that. They could probably see nothing.
Yeah, that's possible. And that moment, there is an instrument that NASA has in the concept planning stage called the Big Bang Observer, which is intended to achieve exactly that, to see. To try to get an image of at least the very first moments, at least the aftermath of that.
So that we get some pictures of two entities hanging around in space, coming up with this whole idea.
There you go.
You never know.
You never know.
I'll tell you what, James, when we come back, we're going to go to Fast Blast questions for you, and then we'll take some phone calls at the top of the hour. Tell me a little bit about where you can get The Intelligent Universe.
Well, you can get it, of course, on Amazon. You can get it on Barnes & Noble and Borders and many independent bookstores around the country.
And I've got a couple websites for you. One is the old Biocosm one, and the other one is the new one?
Is www.intelligentuniverse.org.
All right, very good. James Gardner is our guest. We're talking about the intelligent universe with all kinds of theories. And I'll tell you what we're going to do. We'll open up the Fast Blasts now and fire away. If you have any specific questions for Jim, I will relay them to him. And then next hour, we will open up the phone lines and give you an entire hour with him. It is amazing that a lawyer would be able to have the mind, Jim, of a scientist. Do scientists get upset because you're a lawyer?
But most of them have been very generous in their comments since I've taken the trouble to go through the whole peer review process with professional scientific journals.
Well, keep up the good work. We'll be back with you in just a moment. We'll take these fast blast questions now. It's been open all night, but make them specific to James Gardner, if you will. I'm George Norrie, back in a moment on Coast to Coast AM. Well, like I said, we'll take your fast blast questions now, and then we'll open up the phone lines next hour. James Gardner, our guest, right here on Coast to Coast AM. All right, we're back with James Gardner. James, what I'm going to do is we get these computer fast blast questions, and I'm just going to read them to you and get you to react or answer it, okay?
Great.
Now, this one comes in from Tracy in Malibu, California, not too far from where we are now. Tracy says, this universe, life forms, where did we come from? It's driving me nuts. 100 blind people are touching tiny different parts of a huge elephant and describing how an elephant looks. That is what it's like now. God settles it for me. So what do you react to that?
Well, I think it's important to probe and to push and to try to figure out, using those many touches, the shape of the elephant. And that's exactly what I've tried to do in this book, to take what Murray Gell-Mann, the Nobel laureate who invented quark theory, said, take a crude look at the whole. And to try to probe that mystery with every tool at our disposal.
Judah, Ames, Iowa. Jim, what do you think E.T. life will be composed of? Carbon-based life like that on Earth, or perhaps something different? Silicon, for example. And do you think E.T. life will look like us, or the Greys that we talk about?
Very good question. I think that it will probably begin as carbon-based life because carbon has a unique capability to self-organize that really no other element has. But I think it's very likely to progress to a post-biological form in the sense of what we were talking about before, intelligent machines. And whether it will look like us, that's an open question. Many people, Simon Conway Morris from Cambridge University, believes that the phenomenon of evolutionary convergence, when sort of fish and dolphins, for instance, achieve very similar shapes, means that it might well look like us.
Yogrenda from Henderson, Nevada. What if the aliens decide they like our religions? Maybe they are scientifically advanced, but they lack spirituality.
That's very possible. And that's one of the things that I think that would be most interesting would be to see how essentially religion changes in the aftermath of contact. And it could, in fact, be as the listener mentioned.
Robert from Bakersfield, California. James, is it possible that God did not create us, but rather we are creating God as we speak, with repercussions that will echo in eternity?
That's one way of characterizing my approach. My theory is that we are, in effect, we're builders of universes ourselves.
Brad from Ontario. Do you think that one day we will find out the key is not to go mechanical with artificial intelligence, but organic? I have a theory that one day we will even be able to do things even as far as growing spaceships, and it will be a sort of life form.
Yeah, that's another variation, but that the difference between what we consider to be organic and what we consider to be mechanical will essentially disappear. That's really the model of evolutionary computation, where what happens is essentially a very organic process occurs on a silicon substrate.
Elijah, Louisville, Kentucky. Jim, do you believe the human spirit is part of a collective soul, or that the same source had the power and forethought to create the individual spirit, place it at will?
I do believe in the concept of human spirit, human nobility, and I don't distinguish it really from the universe itself. I think that when we think of life, intelligence and the universe, we're talking about different aspects of a single phenomenon.
Gina from British Columbia, can you explain how DNA relates to the universe?
I believe that the laws and constants of physics serve a function precisely equivalent to DNA, that they are a kind of cosmic DNA in that they prescribe a program by which the universe progresses toward life and ever greater intelligence, and also that cosmic DNA provides a kind of template, an architectural pattern for the construction of a new universe.
Like this one from Sarah, Oakley, California. If atoms are live or living, would American Indians and other civilizations as well then be correct in giving the attributes of life to rocks, for example?
Well, I think that I don't think that atoms are alive, but I think that the carbon atom in particular has characteristics which make it uniquely appropriate for yielding life, for turning into a living entity.
Now, here's one that's a little tough for me, but for you, probably not. John from San Diego. In an all but infinite universe, which has but one example of life, how can it be said that the universe abounds with life when there is no evidence of extraterrestrial life at all? Does not the evidence support the reverse?
We have just begun to explore what Jill Tarter from the SETI Institute calls the cosmic haystack, and I am certainly not prepared to concede that we will never find evidence of extraterrestrial life and intelligence. As the SETI researchers are fond of saying, absence of evidence is not evidence of absence.
I like this one from Stephen in Juneau, Alaska. He said, James, if the universe is just coming to life as an emerging organism at 13.7 billion years, at what age do you think it might reach maturity and reproduce itself?
I think that we have many, many tens of billions of years to go.
Is that possible, by the way?
Yes, yes, indeed. The most serious astrophysicists, John Wheeler, Frank Tipler, and others, believe that the vast majority of the years of life that the universe has ahead of it, that the timeline ahead of it exceeds by an order of magnitude the time that's already elapsed.
Joe from Portland wants to know of your thoughts of Frank Tipler's versions of theories.
It's close. I discuss Tipler more in Biocosm than I do in the intelligent universe, but I draw pretty heavily on his work in the cosmological anthropic principle, along with John Barrow.
What would happen to the Earth if the moon was impacted by an asteroid or a comet that comes from Sean in Delaware?
It could be very, very ugly.
It could ruin us all, couldn't it?
Yeah.
We'd have a bad day.
And I just heard an old speech by Carl Sagan, and I had forgotten exactly what the odds are of that, but his calculation, a few years ago, was that over the next century, the possibility of a civilization-ending impact occurring is something like 1 in 2,000, which is that's a pretty serious risk.
Yeah, it sure is. It sure is. Vegas would take those odds, but that's a pretty serious risk.
It's a serious risk. It's a lot more risk than getting in an airliner.
Jacob from California wants to simply know what your views are if the humans have a face-to-face meeting with ETs. What do you think would happen?
I think that it would be a moment of a turning point in human history, and it would tell us once and for all we're not alone, that we share a living universe.
Gene from Pine, Arizona. Tell me more about evil. Does it fit into the universe?
It's inevitably here. It's incontestably here. We see it playing out every day in our world.
Buzz from Waukegan, Illinois. Do you have any views on the year 2012? Do you think anything will happen of any significance?
The year 2012, I'm
That's the
don't
Mayan,
have any view
that's a Mayan calendar end date.
I don't.
All right, very good. Here's another one from Karim from Albany, New York. What do you think of the wisdom behind mass consciousness in inviting God that knows into what reality? What do you think? Will that work?
Well, I think that we are in a sense moving toward a state of collective consciousness or mass consciousness, and it's created and mediated by the increasing linkage that the internet is creating, and that in effect you could say that people and their artifacts are in some sense becoming the analogs of neurons in a collective brain.
Chad from Big Rapids, Michigan wants to know that if the universe does not go on forever, what's the wall like?
It could be something like a singularity, which would be a point of essentially a kind of black hole or what's called a tunneling event in quantum physics, by which we essentially send the cosmic code necessary to create a new baby universe over into our successor.
Ed wants to know if you've read the book by Hugh Ross about design evidences, and do you agree with him if you have read that?
Have not read it.
Okay. Phil from Montreal wants to know, there must be life elsewhere according to the relativity principle, that there are no privileged or special reference frames. The cold death of the universe is not possible, as that would make now a special time. That's a tough one.
I would agree. It's called the mediocrity principle.
Yeah, what does that mean?
That means that just like Copernicus said that the Earth is not the center of the solar system.
Mm-hmm.
There's nothing particularly special about our place in the universe or our time, our place in time, and you can extend that to say that since we observe life here on Earth, and since there doesn't appear to be anything particularly special, there are the size of our moon, for instance, is a little bit unusual, but nothing particularly special, that it's highly likely that life and intelligence will have emerged elsewhere in the cosmos.
Are you optimistic about the humankind in the future? I
basically am, and I said maybe I'm a cockeyed optimist, but I think that I kind of agree with Martin Luther King that the arc of the universe tends toward justice and progress.
Raymond, Crown Point, Indiana. Could the dark matter of the universe be spirit?
Well, it's no one quite knows what, and I think he means dark energy.
Mm-hmm. Right.
No one quite knows what it is, frankly, and it's the greatest. It's one of the greatest mysteries in all of science right now.
What do you think it could be?
Well, I think it's something like what Einstein was speculating about, a kind of anti-gravity. Now, the amazing thing about dark energy is, if it were, it's the most recent evidence of fine-tuning, because if it were even a tad bit greater, tad bit stronger, the universe would long ago have essentially been blown to smithereens. Our sky would be empty. There wouldn't have been the possibility for stars and galaxies to have formed, much less persisted. So it had to be tiny in value, or we could not exist.
I'm going to paraphrase Warren from Vancouver, British Columbia, in Canada, about evidence of some kind of constant harmonic emanation or frequency. Do you bring that up at all in your book?
No, I don't.
That's too physics there.
Yeah.
Do you think God created the universe?
I think that a predecessor universe created our universe, and that was essentially an organism, a kind of a living entity, and I call it the biocosm.
Jerry from Tennessee. What came first, Jim? The chicken or the egg?
Yeah, there you go. And
that tells it all, doesn't it?
That says it all. And the final chapter of The Intelligent Universe, my book, speculates that maybe the chicken and the egg sort of create one another, that there's a kind of a circle of life, if you will, that whereby the future actually plays a role in creating the past and vice versa.
Here's a science question for you, Dan from Illinois. Tell me about the peer review process in science. In essence, is that effective?
Yeah, I think it is. And the thing I really like about the peer review process, it reminds me of an old cartoon I saw in the New Yorker, and it's two dogs looking at a computer screen, and one says to the other, "You know what I really like about the internet? On the internet, no one knows you're a dog." And in the peer review process, you have to be your ideas are evaluated on the merits, not on the basis of what your particular credentials might be. That's the only reason I've been able to get published in scientific journals, is because I have to make the case on the merits.
Mike from Cleveland, Ohio. Is the universe really expanding?
Yes.
You believe that? Tell me more.
Well, it certainly is expanding. In fact, the expansion is accelerating because of the influence of dark energy, and that's one of the most fascinating discoveries of recent years in cosmology.
Shane from New Orleans, where they're wrapping up Mardi Gras. Why is the size of the moon so unusual? I don't know if it is, but that's his question.
Well, we don't know that it is, but if just taking the sample in terms of the relationship of the size of the moon to the size of the Earth, it is unusually large when judged by the ratios that exist elsewhere in our solar system.
If you could get one answer, James, one answer just definitively given to you, what would the question be?
Why is the universe life-friendly?
I wonder what that answer would be. Maybe it was supposed to be.
Maybe it was supposed to be.
It may come down to that, just as simple as that. Well, all I know is that this is an intelligent audience, James, huh?
That's great. Oh, these are great questions.
We're going to take phone calls at the top of the hour when we come back with you. Do you travel much?
Not that much. I kind of travel. I like to travel mentally more than I do physically.
This would be great at a lecture hall.
Yeah, I've done that. I did one at the Hayden Planetarium in New York, and it was great fun.
Hayden?
Yeah.
Wasn't that the name of the guy in the movie Contact?
I can't remember.
I think it was.
Wow.
He was the guy with all the money who funded the project.
Oh, wow.
I wonder if that's probably where they got it from.
Yeah, could be.
Gotta be. Okay, if you need to email me, that's George at coasttocoastam.com. That's simple. Just fire away. One last quick question from Dale in Canada. I believe that the big G in God is the intelligence that exists between atoms. That's an interesting take.
That's an interesting idea, yeah. It's, the really amazing thing is that, as Darwin put it, from so simple a beginning, from these indistinguishable electrons and protons that combine to form a carbon atom, from so simple a beginning, something as complex as a human being and the culture that human beings have created could emerge.
Okay, stay with us. We'll open up the phone lines now. We'll give you an opportunity. I know the phones have been ringing all hour, so we'll get to you as quickly as we can. James Gardner, our guest. If you need to get to his websites, they're linked up at coasttocoastam.com. Indeed it is, and our guest, James Gardner, he's sticking around for an hour of your phone calls with him, so we'll be right back on Coast to Coast AM. And welcome back. Lots of information coming from you, Mr. Gardner.
Thank you, sir.
Appreciate it. We're going to take a lot of phone calls. They've been calling you for 2 hours, so let us go to the phones now. West of the Rockies, you're on the air. Well, we'll go first-time caller line first. You're on the air with us. Hi there.
Hi, George. Great show, as always. This is Ron calling from Hawaii.
Hey, Ron. Thanks for calling.
I just wanted to touch on something. The end of last month, you had a guest. I believe his name was Brent, and he was talking about the intergalactic disturbance that coincides with the Mayan calendar of 2012 that I guess is supposed to be possibly the end of Earth as we know it. And I just wanted to ask a two-part question to your guest. First one is kind of tongue-in-cheek. If our government did know about a cataclysmic, I guess, being in a course line with a asteroid or some type of body that would, pretty much end Earth as we know it, or end life on Earth as we know it, do you think that they would tell us, and should they tell us? And the second part of my question is that if he concurs or if he disputes what Brent was talking about as far as the intergalactic disturbance that coincides with the Mayan calendar, and I believe 2012 was the year that this is supposed to come to fruition. Okay. And I'll take the call. I'll take the answer off the line.
Okay, I'm not sure you can comment on the 2012 end.
No, unfortunately I'm not familiar with that. Though you've really piqued my curiosity now. So I'm gonna look into that. But what I would have said a few years ago. Well, of course the government will disclose to us if they come up with evidence that we're facing imminent catastrophe. But my skepticism has really grown, and I'm not sure that I would take that view anymore. I think it might well be concealed now.
Yeah, you may be right about that, and that's disappointing. But I think if they told us an asteroid happened to be coming this way, there'd be massive panic.
I think that's right. But the irony is, and now there's a new effort at the United Nations level to try to actually develop the technology and a global consensus to deal with that. And I think that's a great thing, that we, to try to figure out what the engineering possibilities might be for deflecting one that's headed our way.
Let's go west of the Rockies. You're on Coast to Coast. Hi there.
Hello?
Yeah, go ahead, please.
Oh, okay. Hi. My name's Chris. Well, it's great to get to talk to you, first of all, because I've been listening to you for a long time.
Thanks,
and all that.
Chris.
But
sure.
Basically, I read a fictional book once, and I just thought it was kind of interesting, the idea that they had in the book, and the idea was that each sort of solar system would be an atom that would make up a bigger particle, maybe like a blade of grass or something on an entirely different planet, so that the sun being the nucleus, and then basically so the way it would break down is so that every atom that makes up everything in our world would be its own smaller solar system that would have many, many solar systems within that. And I just wondered if you'd ever heard anything like that before, and what your opinions were on that.
Well, it's interesting. The general idea of a kind of nested hierarchies is very much a central idea in complexity theory, that you sort of build from simple units outward. You start with electrons, and then you turn them into atoms, and then atoms combine into molecules, which combine into people, which combine into societies, and so that at every level of hierarchy, you kind of have the patterns repeating. And I think it's pretty clear that you do see repetitions of patterns. And there's a little picture in my book that compares the pattern of a mouse brain to the pattern of galaxies in the universe. And you could swear that the caption says something like "separated at birth." You could swear it was two images of the same pattern.
Yeah. That's. I just thought it was. I just thought it was a really interesting thing. When I read that, it was actually just a fictional book, but I think the moral of the whole setup was that how hard it would be for if there was in fact a god or whatever, how hard it would be to keep track of one person in a system that was so infinite.
Indeed, but on by the same token, how miraculous it is that these patterns keep repeating at such vastly different levels of organization. That's truly amazing.
Yeah, I agree. Well, thanks a lot. That's pretty much all I have. But it's really great to talk to you. And like I said, I'm a huge Coast fan and all that. But I'll go ahead and get off the line now. So.
Okay, great. Appreciate you being on the program, Chris. East of the Rockies, you're on Coast to Coast. Hi there.
Hello there. How are you doing this morning, guys?
We are well. Where are you calling from?
New Orleans. My name is Lyle.
Lyle. Mardi Gras time. Were you right in the middle of all that?
No, I am coming in from Florida back into work. I took a long weekend.
Okay, go ahead.
Hey, I had a couple of questions. I have a point at the end of it. If the universe is intelligently designed, doesn't it follow that there are some designed laws or rules that go with that universe. And don't those rules or laws apply not just to its initial creation, but its continued existence?
Absolutely. That's in fact a central premise of my theory that the laws and principles, essentially of physics, are a kind of architect's plan or a code that basically prescribes how the universe will evolve and how it will yield life and intelligence.
Well, but above and even beyond that, and from what I see and what I observe and what I look at is what is actual science. When you take what science is supposed to be, how science is supposed to prove facts, I see no evidence for evolution. None. It doesn't exist.
Well, that's
on top of that, there being laws and rules, not just for creation, but for its continued existence. Does that mean that the Creator then has laws and rules that he wants us to abide by? And he gave those to us in his book.
Well,
and that's the purpose of my call there, is that I understand what you're trying to say, but I think you're missing the focal point of why the Creator made the universe. Why is it life-friendly? Because he said it was supposed to be.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's a very interesting question, and I think that as I mentioned, I'm not particularly a religious person, but what I am struck by is how incredibly fine-tuned the universe is and conducive to life. If it had been varied by even a little bit, if dark energy had been a little stronger, we couldn't exist, and that's truly an amazing feature.
You know what's so fascinating about this, James, is even the greatest minds on the planet, even they really don't understand how it all started.
No, they're baffled. It is as I mentioned. Paul Davies and Brian Greene, two brilliant scientists, say it's the deepest mystery in all of science.
Everybody has a theory, but nobody knows for sure.
Right.
Next up, let's go to our wild card line. Welcome to Coast to Coast. You're on the air with James Gardner. Hi there.
Yeah, George.
Yes, sir.
Hi, this is Michael out of Dallas.
Okay, Michael.
My call kind of falls in with your first caller as to whether our government would tell us if a major catastrophe was going to hit or anything. What I'm curious about, when you was doing your fast flash, you had asked James a question about what the odds were if a meteor was to hit the Earth, and right as he was giving what the odds were, my station out of Dallas over here, 570 KLIF, went into a commercial break on diabetes, and right as it ended, he was just finishing up his question. And what I wanted to know, what was the answer?
On the odds?
On the odds of of it hitting.
Yes, this was from Carl Sagan's estimate from a few years ago when he was still alive.
Yes,
and he said over the next 100 years, it's roughly 1 in 2,000, that's pretty high risk.
It sure is, considering the one in 2036, is right. 1 in 45,000.
Yeah, it's a pretty serious risk.
Okay, well that's why I was wanting to know, because it just seemed kind of strange that right as he was giving what the odds were, this station went into a commercial break, and it come right back right as he was finishing up that question, and it really baffled me. So I figured, well, I'm going to call George and let him know about this.
One other thing I want to add on there, and I mentioned this on page 32 of my book. Isaac Newton wrote. He had a sort of a secret canon of writings that were somewhat, religious in nature, in addition to his, of course, scientific writing. And near the end of his life, he sort of casually predicted that the Earth would face a catastrophic event in the year 2060. He actually pinned down the year. And it's one of the great mysteries of, what in the world was he talking about?
Right. Okay. Can you tell me what the name of your book is again?
The Intelligent Universe.
The Intelligent Universe. All right. I'll go out and get it and read through it. But I appreciate it, and I just thought that was kind of curious. I thought you might like to know about that.
That's very interesting.
Okay, thanks, Michael. Appreciate you being part of the program on our number 1 rated station, by the way, in Dallas, KLIF. Huge station for us down there. Wildcard Line, you are on the air with us. Hi there.
Hello.
Hi. Where are you calling from?
Oklahoma.
Oklahoma. Go ahead.
Yes. I never thought I would have seen it in my life, but I've had a couple of sightings, one on the 5th, one tonight. And I've talked with others, and they've said that there's been a higher occurrence of sightings even in the last couple of months. If you've heard that's true, do you think that directly correlates with the coming of 2012, or what do you think about that?
You know, I don't know. I'm a bit of a skeptic, but I'm certainly always open to observations and the possibilities. I think we have to kind of keep an open mind as to what the possibilities are. But I'm just not familiar with that particular evidence.
You know, I'm a very rational person, and of course I'm going through the checklist. Okay, it's not a pulsar, it's not an airplane. It's nothing like I've ever seen, and, I was wondering if anyone around might have seen it. You know, there's a lot of oil field truckers out here, and I don't know.
Very interesting. Yeah, that's most interesting.
Okay, thanks. Appreciate you being part of the program as well. The name of the book we're talking about, of course, The Intelligent Universe, AI, ET, and the Emerging Mind of the Cosmos. Let's go next to our next wildcard line. Welcome to the program. Hi there.
Hi, George. Hi, James. This is Jeff calling from North Carolina.
Hey, Jeff. Thanks.
Hey, thank you. James, I enjoyed your last book, The Selfish Biocosm. And
good.
Looking forward to this one.
Great.
You give a good atheistic/materialistic alternative to the fine-tuning problem.
Well, it's I'm just trying to push the frontier of science as far as it can be pushed without going totally off the deep end.
Exactly, and I appreciate that. Here's my question for you. I have actually 3 questions, but they're related. What role does chance play in your concept, given the fact that quantum fluctuations determine the early galaxy formation,
Yep.
and the fact that one universe goes through a singularity to form another universe,
Yep.
and those are both inherently random processes? What role does chance play in your universe, and how do you get information through the singularity to influence the next universe?
That's a great question, and it's interesting because as you move up to the macroscopic scale, quantum fluctuation kind of becomes a little bit less. It certainly is the seed that created the structure, the formation of structure at the earliest stages of the Big Bang.
Right.
But what I believe is that, and this is, I have some discussion of some of the sort of newer theories in biocosm that you probably saw, called this ecpyrotic cyclic scenario.
Right. Sure.
And the notion there is that the transition is not a true singularity that completely obliterates the possibility of information transfer, but the only thing that you can kind of push through the tunnel, if you will, to a new cosmos, the only thing you can push through are the set of laws of the physical constants. You can't get any other information through.
Interesting. Did they do that through like Calabi-Yau?
Yeah, that's you in effect have you would have and Calabi-Yau relates to string theory, and it's the shape in which so-called superstrings vibrate, and that shape determines what elementary particle the strings essentially embody. And I hypothesize that at some point, just as we are now seeing nanoengineering, that you would be able to do engineering, Calabi-Yau shape engineering, and that could be the mechanism by which you could actually fine-tune the physical constants and properties of the standard model for a new universe.
Right. Michio Kaku has some.
Yes, he does.
Thinking along the same line.
Yes, he does.
Okay. Thanks for answering my questions.
Thank you.
Where does string theory, James, fit into any of your theories?
Oh, it fits in very, very, very tightly, as it were.
Round up like.
Right up in there. Because string theory and its most recent incarnation, which is called M theory, it hypothesizes that there is the possibility of an almost infinite variety of physical constants, of what are called standard model parameters, and that ours we just happen to get a lucky break, one lucky, draw up the cards or shake of the dice, and that the laws of physics could have turned out in any number of ways. It relates to what Einstein said. One of his famous questions was there any choice by a creator in the laws of physics? And the answer, amazingly, M theory and string theory seems to be able to come up with an answer to that. And the answer is yes, there was an almost infinite range of choices. And again, the great mystery is, how did this particular set of choices that happen to be so life-friendly, how did that manage to come out of the almost infinite range of possibilities that are allowed by string theory?
Well, I got to tell you, have you ever met Sagan when he was alive?
No. The saddest thing one of the saddest things of my life was when I gave one of my first talks. Seth was there. It was in Rio de Janeiro, to the International Astronautical Congress, and the person that was presiding over that, who was Tom Pearson, who was the president of the SETI Institute. He said to me, after my talk, and it kind of gave me goosebumps. He said, I don't really have any questions, but just one comment. I only wish Carl Sagan could have lived to hear that talk.
I love that. Okay, we'll stick around with us. When we come back, we'll continue with final phone calls. I can't believe how fast this hour has been going. With our special guest tonight, James Gardner, is doing yeoman's work. That's Navy talk, by the way. The Intelligent Universe, and it's available at Amazon.com and most major bookstores. We'll be right back in a moment on Coast to Coast AM. If you need to email me, that's George at coasttocoastam.com. And by the way, get up to the website, coasttocoastam.com, and take a look at some of the new things that Lex has posted. We'll be back. On our next Coast to Coast program, Paul Stonehill joins us. He's an expert on former Soviet UFO files. Get ready for that one. That'll be tomorrow on Coast to Coast AM. And welcome back. We've got final calls with our special guest, James Gardner. Jim, is there anything we have not touched on that you want to get out here?
Boy, I think we've run the gamut.
I think so, too. We've even scraped the bottom, haven't we?
and reached for the stars.
You got that right. Back to the calls we go. Let's go to our West of the Rockies line. You're up with us. Where are you calling from?
Hi, this is Ken, and I'm calling from Kilauea, Kauai,
Well,
Hawaii.
welcome, Ken. Thanks for calling.
And I'm on the very, very north point of the inhabited Hawaiian Islands. And when I look out dead north, there's nothing but 3,000 miles of ocean. And lately there's been a lot of UFO sightings out here.
Yeah.
And it got me wondering that maybe these UFOs actually have bases maybe under the sea somewhere, and they pop in and out of the ocean and come out, do their investigating and their testing, and just drop right back down under the ocean. I mean, we know more about the stars and the space than we do about our own ocean right here on our planet. And it makes me wonder a lot of times. I sit here and stare at the ocean and the stars, and I listen to George Norris every night. That's my evening. And so I always wonder about that. I was wondering what your thought on something like that would be.
All right, you're not a UFO buff, James, but go ahead.
Well, it's interesting because, it is really true that that we know so little about that part of our planet, the undersea environment. It's a great knowledge frontier that we're just now beginning to probe. For instance, we learned, in fairly recent time about the existence of this strange ecosystem of extremophiles, organisms that never see sunlight, that have no oxygen to breathe, that exist basically on the energy of chemical reactions.
Right,
Organisms
the bacteria that forms from the underwater
exactly.
volcanic things.
And the truly interesting thing is those kinds of organisms could easily exist on a number of planets and moons in our solar system that would be completely inhospitable for the kind of normal life that we think of. And so I think that the ocean holds great mysteries still, and we need to explore those mysteries and probe them.
Yeah, because this couple that stays next to me, I didn't see it. I wasn't here that night, but the couple that stays next to me, her name's Zaina. She'd seen the red orbs. It was about 3 weeks ago. There were several sightings. They were even talking about it on Coast to Coast, and she saw the red orbs bouncing around the sky, disappearing like into the horizon and or ocean. It's hard to tell. And she saw all that, and she was telling me about that, and that's what got me thinking about the ocean stations for the UFOs and things like that.
Yeah, I think I read a wonderful science fiction book about that too, not too long ago. But it's my view on that is we have to be skeptical, but we have to keep an open mind, and we have to keep evaluating the evidence.
Right. Yeah, and mainly since before I was pretty skeptical, and then for the past 10 months now, after we had the Coloco Dam break here, I've been homeless. So I've been listening to George Norris for the past 10 months, and it's totally changed my whole outlook on UFOs and ETs and things like that. Totally changed my outlook on it, and it was pretty amazing. I really enjoy the show.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Ken. Appreciate you being part of the program. East of the Rockies, you're up with us on Coast to Coast. Hi there.
Good morning, George, James.
Hi.
Hi.
This is Glenn calling from Harlingen, Texas. James, I'd like to run a scenario of extraterrestrial visitation by you and hear your thoughts on it.
Okay.
What if they don't see us as intelligent because they themselves aren't? And I cite examples of social insects here on Earth.
Yeah.
They have mineralogy, chemistry, agriculture, even animal husbandry, such as ants and termites. And on their scale, they build climate-controlled buildings twice the size of the Empire State Building.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And I was thinking that maybe through the eon upon eon of evolution, that they would collect raw materials from planets in their own solar systems and even develop the technologies to go beyond. Thank you.
Yeah, well, it's interesting. I have a discussion in my book about the possibility that that extraterrestrial intelligence might be so alien that we wouldn't even recognize it as such, and they wouldn't recognize us as intelligent entities. That is one possibility. Another is that we could be embedded in essentially a hyper civilization that we don't recognize as such. And the example that the analogy that I give is do mountain gorillas in Africa, for instance, a colony of gorillas, do they have any awareness that they exist in a world where there is an internet, global commerce, etc.? And the answer is, I think, pretty obviously no. So, by analogy, that could be true on a different scale with respect to us.
Okay, next up, a wild card line. Your turn. You're on Coast to Coast.
Hello, Mr. Gardner.
Hi.
Hi. I'm glad I tuned in tonight. I didn't know you had a new book come out.
Yes, sir.
Hey, I read your first one. I was going to ask you a question. You ever heard of Isaac Asimov's short story called The Last Question?
Yes, I have. It's a wonderful, wonderful story.
Yeah, it was. I know it's kind of like it came out. Well, it's a few years out after the Big Bang Theory itself.
Yeah, it's a great story, and the last line, I think, in that story, without giving it away for anybody who has not read it, I think the last line is "Let there be light," isn't it?
Let there be light. Yep, that's right. Because it was well, it's about a computer, right? That,
yes.
And so it was. Well, can I just tell the story real quick here? Just.
Yeah, sure. I guess so.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Well, here's how it goes. There's these two guys. They're getting drunk one night. They've just invented a supercomputer to solve all the world's energy problems through solar energy. One guy's all happy, the other guy's all morose. And he's like, well, "What's the matter?" And he's like, "Well, you can't. This isn't going to do us any good because some guy the whole universe is going to run down." And so they ask the computer, "Can entropy be reversed?"
Yeah.
And the computer thinks for a while, and it says insufficient data for a meaningful answer.
Right.
And then it skips forward, like these families cruising through space centuries in the future, and the kids are like, these stars sure are beautiful. And they ask the dad, well, the daddy's like, well, someday they're all going to burn out, and so the mom says, well, let's ask the computer what they can do about it. And so they ask the computer, can entropy be reversed? And it says insufficient data for a meaningful answer. Then at the very end of the story, of course, there's nothing left in the universe but the giant supercomputer, and it's still thinking about the last question, can entropy be reversed? And it finally figures out the answer and says, let there be light.
Yeah, it's a classic Asimov story. It's one of my favorites.
Yeah. Well, I have one quick question. Like the intelligence design folks, the creationists,
yeah.
Do they cite your book much, or?
Not really. I've been on some programs with Bill Dembski, who is one of their gurus. Who's actually a very, very nice guy, a very, very bright guy. But they really don't, because it doesn't quite fit with their agenda, frankly. And so I just I think my stuff makes them a little uncomfortable, to be very candid.
Well, because it's a materialistic explanation for intelligent design.
Yeah, it's pushing the frontiers, I think, of legitimate scientific speculation. And as you know, I do believe, I think Darwinian evolution is a kind of a sub-program or a subroutine in the scenario that I lay out, but that doesn't mean I don't believe in it.
Okay, well, thanks. Appreciate you being part of the program. Not a lot of time left. We'll take as many calls as we can. First-time caller line, you're up with us. Good morning.
Hello?
Yeah, hi.
Oh, hi, this is Rick from Syracuse, New York.
Sure thing. Go ahead.
And my question was, a great show, by the way, and my question to James was, I was wondering if he was familiar with the international committee that formed the document of principles concerning activities following the detection of extraterrestrial.
I am indeed, yes, and yes, I've actually written a couple of papers related to that.
Okay.
Yeah, I did one on that was presented in Houston at the World Space Congress on it was called Artificial Exosociety Modeling, and what I suggested was that one of the things that would be very interesting to do would be to if you get a signal and it has a fair amount of content in it, you might want to try to, in a sense, kind of like SimCity, try to model what that extraterrestrial society would be and what trends there might be, so that you'd have some idea, assuming the signal came from 500 light years away, what you might be dealing with in deciding whether to send a signal back.
Mm-hmm. Well, it was interesting to me because, well, it seemed to be that the question that they were considering was not necessarily something that would be like 40 or like you say 500 light years in the future, but something a little bit more closer to home in our own solar system.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess that basically, if we do make contact, that there's some kind of an agreement to the consultations should take place, and that procedures for such kind of a response from the world would be considered.
It's a pretty weighty decision, whether to respond and how to respond, even whether to respond. I think it could be a very momentous decision.
Mm-hmm. Well, I thought it was interesting in the fact that that it wasn't so much fashioned after a theoretical question of whether there are extraterrestrials,
right.
but that they are there, and that and we're expecting to be contacting them.
Yeah,
so.
Exactly. So, and I thought it was very interesting that protocol kind of exists. That there's a deliberative process that is contemplated if in fact you do get a meaningful signal. Mm-hmm. But I'm very interested in that topic, and I've actually, as I said, I've done a paper on it. It's called Artificial Exosociety Modeling.
Interesting. All right. Well, thank you very much for taking my call.
Okay, appreciate you being part of the program. Next up, let's go to our West of the Rockies line. You're on the air. Hi there.
Hello?
Yeah, hi, please, go ahead.
George. James, what about wormholes? That's my question. And travel, be cut in half. And why couldn't extraterrestrials, as well as us, go through wormholes, go to parts of the universe, whatever?
Yep.
What do you think about that?
I think it's the challenge is really an engineering challenge. They certainly, as a theoretical matter, are consistent with the laws of physics, and there've been quite a bit of scholarly writing about them, and I certainly don't rule them out as a possibility for traversing the cosmos. There's Kip Thorne in particular at Caltech, who's a very prominent astrophysicist, has written quite a bit about that possibility.
Okay. Well, thank you very much.
Okay, appreciate it. Next up, Wild Card Line. You're on the air with us on Coast to Coast. Hi there.
Good evening, George. Thank you for taking my call.
You
and
are
James,
so
thank
welcome.
you for being on the show tonight. My name's Dan. I'm calling from Portland, Oregon. And, I was
That's my
listening to
hometown.
you. Can you still hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. I apologize for my cell phone, but it's the only phone that I have right now where I'm at. You'd spoken about, mentioned the rat brain and the galaxy.
Yes,
That brought to mind like a holographic, type view. Mm-hmm. And then, or fractals.
Yeah, I actually have a discussion in my book about that, and what it says to me is that that's kind of an interesting indication of how deeply fractal the universe is.
Yeah, I agree. Like maybe, for instance, a black hole would be the transition state. I mean, we can, we identify things by light. We know that if you bump two hydrogen atoms together, and you get a hydrogen atom, a isotope, and helium, or whatever. So there's a transference of information. What if? And I'm going to use the metaphor of, because I think of the kingdom of Nye, Art Bell, being in the desert, and how often does the desert get rain? Mm-hmm. And it may be only one time in certain places a year. And then plants, but anyway, so you have the solar system, the Earth spinning around it. And as our solar system crosses the galactic plane, I mean, it's for us to go faster than light, we would have to go faster than the sun's pull on us, right? I mean,
right.
In other words, to get out of the solar system, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I guess what it all boils down to, you had mentioned an underlying intelligence, and I'm not, it's not a religious comment that I'm making, but there is an underlying intelligence as we go through this field, and because look at what we've done in 200 years, as far as going from, the horse and buggy to stepping on the moon. Mm-hmm. What are we supposed to learn? What are we supposed to learn? What is your synthesis? What caused you to write these books?
Mm-hmm.
What do you think we need to learn? We need to learn something.
Yeah, and again, the deepest question in all of science, and the question that truly intrigues me and as sort of motivates me to kind of to pursue this frontier of knowledge, is that question that I mentioned a few minutes ago: why is the universe life-friendly? It really is the deepest question in all of science.
Okay, great. Final question, east of the Rockies. You're up. Hi.
Yes, this is George from Panama City, Florida.
George, go ahead, sir.
I have two interrelated questions. First, you've been talking about the building blocks of life. I'm wondering, do you think it is possible for man to figure out a way to actually make himself invisible? And also, do you think it's possible that everybody talks about seeing these spaceships and whatever? Isn't it just as possible that they could be all over the sky or actually out walking around among us and just be invisible?
Let me answer. It's actually an interesting question because there is a kind of new technology. They're called metamaterials, and they're sort of nano-engineered materials with some very interesting properties, which actually the military is exploring right now. That create maybe not complete invisibility, but kind of like a stealth bomber. Can deflect radar.
Yeah.
Can do sort of the same thing with light. And there was an article in Scientific American a few months ago about these. And second, I have a discussion in my book about, the possibility that, just as I mentioned, a colony of mountain gorillas would be totally oblivious to the fact that they're living in the midst of a technological civilization with internet access and jet airliners, et cetera. It's entirely possible that there could exist essentially a super civilization out there that we wouldn't even be aware of.
We got to find them sometime, Jim. Hey, thanks. I appreciate you being on the program. For Steve Carr, Dan Galante, Tom Danheiser, Lisa Lyon, Lex Lonehood, Sean Ladesseur, Ross Mitchell, Alan Corbett, Stephanie Smith, Ian Punnett, and Art Bell, I'm George Norrie. Somewhere out there on Coast to Coast AM. I'll see you on our next edition. Until then, be safe.